They were not slaves. The official story collapsed 34 years ago, quietly, without headlines, without a press conference, without anyone in mainstream media pausing to tell you what had just been discovered in the sand beneath your feet. A tomb, a village, a graveyard full of people who were paid, fed, medicated, buried with honor, and the institution that built its entire narrative around the word slave for 150 years simply moved on, updated the textbook, hoped you would not ask the obvious question. The question is this: if they were not slaves, then who organized the most complex construction project in the history of the ancient world? Who had the authority, the mathematics, the logistical genius, and the reason to build something so precise that we cannot fully replicate it today with every tool we possess? Because that answer is not in the textbook. That answer is the one they covered up. Start here. Start with a copper chisel, not a metaphor. An actual copper chisel, approximately 30 centimeters long, discovered inside the Great Pyramid in the 19th century. Still the sharpest edge found from that era. Here is the problem with that chisel. The limestone blocks that form the casing of the Great Pyramid were cut to a tolerance of 0.01 millimeters, not centimeters, millimeters. The gaps between those stones, each one weighing between 2 and 15 tons, are so tight that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. A copper chisel does not cut limestone to 0.01 millimeter tolerances. Not in 1,000 years of trying. The chisel is in the museum. The precision is in the stones. And those two things cannot both be true at the same time, unless something about this story is being left out. A single worker's sandal, woven reed, found in the bakery ruins at the Giza workers' village in 1990 by archaeologist Zahi Hawass. That sandal is the most quietly dangerous artifact in Egyptian archaeology because it is the thing that destroyed the slave narrative that Hollywood, the Bible, and a century of scholarship had built into the foundation of everything we thought we knew. The person who wore that sandal was not chained. They walked in. They ate bread, drank beer, received medical treatment for their injuries, and when they died, they were buried in tombs near the pyramid they helped build. They were honored, and someone paid for all of that. The question of who paid for it and why no financial records from that payment have ever been found in the entire archive of ancient Egyptian administration. That question is the one we are going to follow tonight, all the way down, past where the official story ends, past where the careers of several researchers also ended, down to the one thing they will not open. Remember that number, 0.0015 degrees. We will come back to it. When we do, it will mean something entirely different than it does right now. The official story of pyramid construction has changed 3 times in 50 years. That fact alone should disturb you. Not because science changes. Science is supposed to change. But because each change came not from a natural evolution of evidence, but from a discovery that directly contradicted the previous explanation. And each time, the new explanation was adopted quickly, without full debate, and the anomalies that the new theory still could not explain were quietly filed away. The first theory, slaves, mass forced labor. Hundreds of thousands of Hebrews dragged from their homes and worked to death in the desert sun. That theory survived until 1990, when Hawass and his team found the workers' village and the graveyard. Healthy, honored, paid workers, not slaves. Theory 1 collapsed. The second theory, a permanently employed professional workforce of skilled laborers, supplemented by rotating teams of conscripted peasants during the Nile flood season. That theory is the current official position, and it has a problem. Several problems. The first and most fundamental problem is the precision. There is a number that lives inside the Great Pyramid that the current official theory cannot explain. The four base sides of the Great Pyramid are each approximately 230 meters long. The difference in length between the longest and shortest sides is 23 centimeters. That is not a rounding error. That is a deliberate, extraordinary, almost incomprehensible achievement of precision survey and construction across 230 meters of stone. But that is not the number I want you to think about. The number I want you to carry is this. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north to within 0.0015 degrees, not magnetic north, which shifts and drifts and was completely unknown as a concept in 2560 BCE. True geographic north, the rotational axis of the planet. The Great Pyramid finds it to within 0.0015 degrees. And the only thing on Earth more precisely aligned to true north, built after the invention of GPS, is the Paris Observatory at 0.0002 degrees. We beat them by 0.0013 degrees. We barely beat them with satellite navigation. And they did it, we are told, with copper chisels and wooden rods and an eye for the stars. You are still here. That tells me something. Most people get to this point and decide the precision is just an interesting engineering mystery and move on. You did not. So let me tell you the part they do not put in the documentaries. The current workforce theory, professional laborers, rotating teams, was adopted in a remarkably short period after the 1990 village discovery. Hawass, who made the discovery, also became the most powerful figure in Egyptian archaeology shortly after. He served as Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities for over a decade. During that tenure, access to Giza was tightly controlled. Several proposed investigations into anomalies in the pyramid's construction were declined. Foreign researchers who published findings that contradicted the official narrative found their permits to excavate at Giza quietly non-renewed. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented in the academic record, in letters published in peer-reviewed journals, in frustrated conference presentations by researchers from Oxford, Boston University, and the Florida State University whose access to the site was revoked or restricted during that period. They followed the evidence. The evidence led somewhere inconvenient, and the door to Giza was closed. The copper chisel is still in the museum. It is still the sharpest copper tool found from that era, and the limestone blocks are still cut to tolerances that copper cannot achieve. Those two facts have never been reconciled. They exist side by side in the official record, separated by the assumption that we simply do not yet understand the technique. But there is a third possibility, one that several engineers, not archaeologists, have raised in peer-reviewed materials. The possibility that the cutting tools were not copper, were never copper, and that the copper chisel is not evidence of the construction method, but evidence of something else entirely. In 1983, engineer Christopher Dunn published a detailed analysis of the machining marks visible on several granite surfaces inside the Great Pyramid. His conclusion, drawn from measurements and comparisons with modern industrial machining, was that certain surfaces showed spiral patterns consistent with rotary cutting tools, not chisels, rotary cutters. The granite box inside the king's chamber, cut from a single block of solid Aswan granite, a material harder than the copper, bronze, and iron available to ancient Egypt, shows internal corner radii of approximately 0.002 inches. You cannot achieve that radius without a circular cutting tool. You cannot achieve that radius with any hand tool. The official response to Dunn's analysis was not a counter-analysis. It was silence, followed, eventually, by the observation that he was an engineer and not an Egyptologist, which is technically accurate. It also completely avoids the question of whether the machining marks are real. They are real. They are photographed. They are measured. The debate about what made them has never been officially resolved because it has never been officially held. This is where the no padding rule bites deep. Every new fact here opens a wound in the official story that does not close. So let's open another one. The Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid is 47 meters long and 8.6 meters tall. It slopes upward at a 26-degree angle. The corbelled ceiling, where each successive layer of stone projects inward over the one below, is so precise in its geometry that modern engineers who have modeled it describe it as a near-perfect acoustic resonance chamber. Not just a passageway, a chamber designed, whether intentionally or not, to amplify and direct sound in a very specific frequency range, the frequency of the human heartbeat, between 0.5 and 2 Hz. Several acoustic researchers, including John Reed and Robert Vorter, have published studies on the acoustic properties of Giza's interior chambers. Their findings are consistent. The chambers respond to specific sound frequencies in ways that cannot be accidental. The geometry is too precise. The material choices are too deliberate. And the question of why a tomb would be acoustically engineered for the frequency of a living human heartbeat has never been answered. A tomb for a dead man, tuned to the rhythm of the living. Now let me give you the number that breaks the ramp theory. Not the precision, the mass. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. The average weight of those blocks is 2.5 tons. The largest weigh up to 80 tons. The pyramid was, by the most conservative Egyptological estimate, built in approximately 20 years. That means an average of 800 blocks placed per day. Working a 10-hour day, that is 80 blocks per hour. One block every 45 seconds. Every 45 seconds, for 20 years, a block weighing 2.5 tons on average was quarried, transported, lifted, and placed with sub-centimeter precision. Researchers at the Illinois Institute of Technology ran the logistical numbers in 2008. Their conclusion, the ramp theory, in any of its proposed configurations, cannot physically account for the rate of production required. The workforce required to drag blocks up a ramp long enough and angled gently enough to be functional would have exceeded the food production capacity of all of ancient Egypt. You would need to feed more workers than Egypt could grow food for. The ramp theory does not work. The logistics do not work. And the official response to the 2008 paper was, again, a very specific kind of silence. 20 minutes ago, I told you about a sandal in a bakery. Now, I want to tell you what that bakery was capable of. The Giza workers' village bakery based on the hearth structures and storage silos excavated by Mark Lehner's team, could produce approximately 10 loaves of bread per hearth per day. The village had enough hearths to support a permanent workforce of approximately 10,000 to 20,000 workers. That number is what Egyptologists use to defend the feasibility of the ramp theory. A workforce of 20,000 is large, but the Illinois Institute of Technology study required a workforce of over 100,000 for the ramp theory to meet the 45-second block pace. The bakery fed 20,000. The ramp needed 100,000. Those numbers do not meet. They have never been reconciled. They exist in the same official record, separated by the assumption that one of them must be wrong, and the unspoken agreement that we will not press too hard on which one. And we still have not answered the question that opened this investigation, because what I found next made that question look small. The workers were not slaves. We know that. They were paid, fed, honored. Someone organized that. Someone had the administrative genius to coordinate 20,000 or 100,000, or however many workers. Logistics chains spanning hundreds of kilometers from the Aswan granite quarries to the Giza plateau. A medical system, a food production system, and a precision engineering operation, the likes of which would not appear again in recorded human history for thousands of years. That person or those people left records. Ancient Egypt was extraordinarily bureaucratic. Tax records survive. Grain inventories survive. Agricultural surveys from 3000 BCE survive. The paperwork of an entire civilization is there, in museums, in archives, translated and catalogued. And the administrative record of the largest construction project in that civilization's history is absent, not lost, not damaged, not incomplete, absent. The Wadi al-Jaf papyri, discovered in 2013 on the Red Sea coast, are the oldest papyri ever found. They date to the reign of Khufu, the pharaoh credited with building the Great Pyramid. They document a logistical operation, the transport of limestone from Tura across the Nile to Giza. They mention an inspector named Mera. They are genuine. They are extraordinary. They are also the only administrative records of the Great Pyramid's construction that have ever been found. From the entire 20-year construction project of the most complex structure in ancient history, we have one logistical diary from one inspector covering one phase of one material supply, a single officer's notebook. An Egyptologist presented this as confirmation of the official narrative, while the question of where every other administrative record went was not asked loudly enough for anyone to have to answer it. The sandal in the bakery, the copper chisel in the museum, the number 0.0015 degrees. Three things planted at the beginning of this investigation. Hold on to all three. We are going to need them. 0.0015 degrees. Let me tell you what that number actually required, not in general terms, specifically. To align a structure to true geographic north with that precision in 2560 BCE, you need one of three things. You need a fixed astronomical reference point that remains stable across the years of construction. You need a surveying instrument of extraordinary sophistication. Or you need both. The only fixed astronomical reference available to ancient Egyptian surveyors was the rotation of the night sky around the celestial North Pole, the point in the sky that all stars appear to revolve around. In 2560, BCE, there was no single bright pole star as we have Polaris today. The celestial pole sat between two stars, Thuban and Kochab, neither of which marked it precisely. To find true north using those stars, you would need to calculate the exact midpoint of their arc across the night sky over multiple observations. Astronomer Kate Spence published a paper in Nature in 2000 demonstrating this method was theoretically achievable, but theoretically achievable and actually executed to 0.0015 degree precision are separated by something the official record has never provided: the surveying instrument that made it possible. No such instrument has been found. No description of such an instrument exists in Egyptian texts. The knowledge is demonstrated in the stone. The tool that carried it vanished. A tool capable of producing 0.0015 degree alignment across a 230-meter base. Gone. No drawing of it. No description. No successor instrument in the entire archaeological record of ancient Egypt. As if the knowledge arrived, built one structure, and then evaporated. That is not how knowledge transmission works in a functioning civilization. Knowledge is recorded. Knowledge is taught. Knowledge is passed down. The absence of the record is not neutral. The absence of the record is itself a piece of evidence. Here is what Egyptologists say about how the pyramid was built. A workforce of skilled craftsmen supplemented by rotating labor teams quarried limestone at Tura and Giza, transported it on wooden sledges with water poured in front to reduce friction, lifted it via a system of ramps, and placed it with the guidance of master craftsmen using plumb bobs, set squares, and cubit rods. This explanation accounts for the general shape of the pyramid. It accounts for the existence of the workers' village. It accounts for some of the tool marks found in the quarries. It does not account for the precision. The official explanation essentially acknowledges the precision as extraordinary and moves on. It treats the precision as the product of patience and skill rather than something that requires a specific technical explanation. Patience and skill, applied with copper tools, does not produce 0.0015 degree north alignment. It does not produce 0.01 millimeter stone tolerances. It does not produce a sealed granite box inside the king's chamber with internal corner radii of 0.002 inches. Those are not patience. Those are measurements. And measurements require instruments. 12 years ago, you were further into this investigation than 90% of the people who started it. Tonight, you are further than that. Because the next part is what most researchers stop short of publishing. The casing stones. The Great Pyramid was originally encased in highly polished white Tura limestone. Most of those casing stones were stripped away during the medieval period to build Cairo. But at the base of the north face, some original casing stones remain. Those stones were measured in detail by Sir William Flinders Petrie in 1881. Petrie was not a sensationalist. He was the most rigorous field archaeologist of his era and remains one of the most respected in the history of the discipline. His measurements of the remaining casing stones produced a finding he described in his own words as a triumph of skill. The mean variation of the casing stones from a straight line and a true square was 1/100th of an inch, that is 0.254 millimeters, across stones weighing between 10 and 15 tons each, placed by men with copper tools on a desert plateau. In 2560 BCE, Petrie's full measurement data was published. His conclusions were accepted as accurate, and the question of how copper tools and wooden sledges produced 0.254 millimeter tolerances across 15-ton stones was quietly absorbed into the general category of extraordinary ancient achievement and filed away. Now, I want to introduce you to a discovery that changed the conversation and then disappeared from it. In 2017, a team of scientists using cosmic ray muon tomography, a scanning technique that uses naturally occurring subatomic particles to image the interior of large solid objects, the same technique used to scan the interior of the Fukushima reactor, announced the discovery of a previously unknown large void inside the Great Pyramid, above the Grand Gallery, roughly 30 meters long, possibly larger. The Scan Pyramids project, a joint venture between French and Japanese universities in collaboration with the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, confirmed the void through 3 separate detection methods. This was a genuine scientific discovery, a hidden chamber inside the most studied structure on Earth, found because a technology that did not exist 2 decades ago was finally pointed at the right place. The announcement made international news for approximately 4 days, and then the conversation stopped. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities confirmed the void, then announced that no physical investigation would be conducted, no drilling, no endoscopy, no follow-up scan from a different angle to determine depth or contents. The reason given was that investigation would risk damaging the structure. This is the same structure that tourists walk through daily. The same structure that has had researchers installing temperature sensors, laser measuring equipment, and microwave radar units inside it for decades. The structure was not too fragile for 30 years of investigative technology. It became too fragile for the one technology that found something new. That void is still there, unexamined, and the official position is that examining it is inadvisable. The tension battery needs a recharge here. Let me drop something quiet before I detonate what comes next. In 1954, a sealed pit was discovered on the south side of the Great Pyramid. Inside, it was a dismantled cedar wood boat, 43 meters long, in 1,224 pieces. It had been sealed in the pit for 4,500 years. When researchers removed one of the covering stones, the air that rushed out smelled of cedar. 4,500 years, and the wood still held its scent. That detail is not relevant to precision engineering. It is not relevant to construction methods. It is relevant to the question of what else might still be exactly as it was placed, inside sealed spaces around and within the pyramid, waiting for someone with the right instrument and the right permission to look. There is a second boat pit, confirmed by ground-penetrating radar in 1987. It has never been fully excavated. The wood inside is believed to still be intact. Now detonate. In 1986, French architects Gilles Dormion and Jean-Patrice Guadin used microgravimetric analysis to detect what they described as 3 previously unknown chambers inside the Great Pyramid. They applied for permission to drill a small exploratory hole. Permission was granted. They drilled. They found sand. Fine, clean construction sand, carefully placed. The chambers appeared to be real. The sand appears to have been deliberately packed into them. construction sand, sealed inside hidden chambers. That is not a structural feature. That is not a natural deposit. That is a deliberate act. Somebody put that sand there. Somebody sealed those chambers. And the question of why those chambers were built and then deliberately filled with sand has never entered the official explanation of how or why the pyramid was constructed. Let me tell you about a man named Robert Bauval, and the night he changed archaeology by doing nothing more dangerous than looking up at the sky. In 1983, Bauval noticed something. The three pyramids of Giza are not perfectly aligned with each other. The third pyramid, Menkaure, is offset to the left of the line formed by the other two. If you look at the three stars of Orion's belt, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, they form almost exactly the same pattern. Two aligned, one slightly offset. Bauval published the Orion correlation theory in 1994, proposing that the Giza pyramid complex was deliberately laid out to mirror the ground-level position of Orion's belt as it appeared in the sky around 10,500 BCE, not 2560 BCE, 10,500 BCE, 8,000 years before the pyramids were supposedly built. The official response was fierce and immediate. The theory was dismissed, debated, attacked on astronomical and archaeological grounds. Some of the criticism was valid, some of the criticism was not. But buried in the noise of the debate was a question that none of the critics fully answered. Why does the offset match? Why does the specific lateral displacement of Menkaure's pyramid correspond so precisely to the specific lateral displacement of Mintaka from the other two belt stars? If the layout was random or purely functional, the probability of that correspondence occurring by chance is extremely small. No official study has calculated that probability. No official paper has engaged with the numerical specificity of the match. The debate was loud and the question was drowned in it. 10,500 years BCE, before the pyramids, before dynastic Egypt, before the Neolithic Revolution had fully taken hold across the ancient world. If the Giza complex encodes astronomical information from that era, then either the builders in 2560 BCE were deliberately referencing a much older astronomical tradition, or the site itself is much older than the official timeline allows. The carbon dating. We need to talk about the carbon dating. Organic material can be dated using radiocarbon analysis. Mortar used between pyramid blocks contains organic matter. In 1984, a team from the Smithsonian Institution and Southern Methodist University collected mortar samples from the Giza pyramids and submitted them for radiocarbon dating. The results came back older than the accepted construction date by between 374 and 429 years. Older. The mortar dated to an era before Khufu. The official interpretation was that the builders were using ancient wood as fuel, contaminating the samples with older carbon. That is a valid methodological concern. So in 1995, a second round of sampling was conducted, more carefully this time, with attention to contamination sources. The 1995 results were published in a limited circulation academic report. They showed the same pattern, consistently older than the official date, by a similar margin. The 1995 results were not widely publicized. The contamination explanation was retained, and no third round of carbon dating has been conducted at Giza using modern AMS, accelerator mass spectrometry. methods that are significantly more resistant to contamination errors. We have the technology to answer this question definitively. We have not used it. The permission to use it has not been granted. A mortar sample in a museum, the 1995 report in a limited circulation archive, and a question about the age of the most studied structure in human history that modern technology could answer in a laboratory in approximately 6 weeks, left open for 30 years. You have been in this investigation long enough now that I want to show you the shape of the pattern before we go deeper into it. Because the pyramid construction question is not an isolated anomaly. It is one node in something larger. Every time a researcher has brought a new technology to the Giza plateau and found something that did not fit the official timeline or the official construction theory, a specific sequence of events has followed. The finding is initially reported. It generates interest. And then one of 3 things happens. Access to conduct follow-up investigation is denied. The finding is reinterpreted through the lens of the existing explanation in a way that neutralizes its challenge. Or the researcher involved finds that their future access to Egyptian archaeological sites becomes complicated. This pattern is documented. It is not alleged. The names are in the academic record. The letters declining research permits are on file. The conference presentations describing restricted access are transcribed. John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, Robert Bovell, Colin Reeder, Samir Osmanagic. Researchers from institutions ranging from independent to Boston University to the University of Edinburgh. Different methodologies, different findings, the same outcome. The sandal is still in the bakery. The chisel is still in the museum. 0.0015 degrees is still in the stone. And now there is one more number I need you to carry. 1993. Because in 1993, a robotics engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robot up a shaft inside the Great Pyramid that no human being could fit inside. The robot was called Upuot II. It traveled 65 meters up the southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber. And at the end of the shaft, it found a door. A small limestone door with 2 copper fittings, intact, sealed, at the end of a shaft, 65 meters inside the most studied structure in human history that no researcher had ever examined closely before, because no human could fit inside it and no robot had ever been sent up it. The door was real. The images were transmitted live. Gantenbrink's footage was broadcast internationally. The find was immediately significant. And then, the Egyptian Antiquities Authority announced that Gantenbrink had violated protocol by releasing the footage to the media before notifying them. His access was revoked. He was not permitted to return. The door sat at the end of that shaft, sealed, for 9 years. In 2002, a new robot was sent up the shaft by a National Geographic-sponsored team. It drilled a small hole through the door. A camera was inserted. Behind the door was a small chamber. Inside the chamber was another door. That second door has never been opened. The camera showed it clearly. The chamber between the 2 doors is real. The second door is real. And the official reason that the second door has never been opened is that no follow-up investigation has been approved. 2 doors, 1 robot, 9 years of waiting, 1 hole drilled, 1 chamber revealed, 1 second door found, and then nothing. That second door is still sealed. Tonight, right now, while you are listening to this. Inside the most examined building in human history, behind a door that a robot found in 1993, through a hole drilled in 2002, there is a sealed space that no human being and no instrument has ever entered. And the institution with the authority to open it has declined to do so. We still have not answered the master loop. We still do not know who built the pyramids, how or why the evidence is being managed this carefully. But we are about to find the document that should have made all of this impossible to suppress. And the story of what happened to that document and the man who brought it to the world's attention is the place where this investigation gets truly dark. The inventory stele. If you have never heard of it, that is not an accident. It is a limestone stele, discovered at Giza in 1858 by French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette. It is currently in the Cairo Museum, catalogue number JE2091. It is real. It is photographed. It is translated. And it contains a single line of text that, if taken at face value, demolishes the entire official timeline of Giza's construction in one sentence. The stele, written during the reign of Khufu, the pharaoh credited with building the Great Pyramid, records that Khufu ordered the construction of a monument beside the Sphinx. Not the Sphinx itself, a monument beside it, meaning the Sphinx already existed when Khufu was alive, meaning the Sphinx predates the pyramid complex, meaning the Sphinx was not built by Khafre, Khufu's successor, as Egyptology has maintained for 150 years. The official response to the inventory stele is that it was composed centuries after Khufu's reign and therefore represents a later religious tradition rather than historical fact. That is possible. It is also possible that it is accurate. The deciding question would be, how old is the Sphinx? And that question was answered in 1991 by a geologist, not an Egyptologist, and the answer was not welcome. Robert Schoch is a professor of geology at Boston University. In 1991, at the invitation of John Anthony West, he examined the weathering patterns on the Sphinx enclosure, the pit dug into the Giza plateau in which the Sphinx sits. Schoch's analysis was geological, not archaeological. He was not looking at inscriptions or artifacts. He was looking at rock. Specifically, he was looking at the pattern of erosion on the vertical walls of the enclosure. What he found was vertical weathering channels, deep, rounded erosion, consistent with prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall. Not wind erosion, not sand abrasion, water erosion. The problem is that the Giza plateau has been hyper-arid desert for approximately 5,000 to 7,000 years. The last period of significant rainfall in that region was the African humid period, which ended roughly 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. Schoch's geological conclusion was that the Sphinx enclosure shows erosion consistent with exposure to heavy rainfall over an extended period, which places the carving of the Sphinx at a minimum of 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, possibly significantly older, possibly as old as 9,000 to 10,000 BCE. Schoch presented his findings at the 1991 Geological Society of America annual meeting. Geologists in attendance largely found his methodology sound. Egyptologists did not attend that meeting. When they responded, the response was not geological. It was territorial. Dr. Zahi Hawass, then director of the Giza Pyramid Complex, described Schoch's theory as American hallucinations. He did not publish a counter-geological analysis. he published a dismissal. No counter-geological study of the Sphinx enclosure weathering has ever been published in a peer-reviewed journal. 34 years after Schoch's initial presentation, the geological argument has never been formally rebutted on geological grounds. It has been dismissed, it has been mocked, it has been excluded from mainstream Egyptological discourse. But it has never been answered with data. If Schoch is correct, even partially, the implications are not minor. They are civilization rewriting. A sphinx carved between 9,000 and 7,000 BCE means a culture capable of large-scale rock carving existed on the Giza plateau thousands of years before the earliest known complex civilization, thousands of years before Sumeria, thousands of years before dynastic Egypt. A culture that looked at the sky from that plateau and understood it well enough to encode astronomical alignments into the landscape, and then disappeared, leaving the plateau and its geometry and its precision as the only record that they were ever there. That is the shape of the evidence when you follow it without stopping. 3 researchers, 3 careers. Let me be precise about this because precision matters here. John Anthony West spent decades arguing that the Sphinx predated dynastic Egypt based on the erosion evidence. He brought Schoch to Giza. He funded and organized the Geological Survey. After the 1991 presentation, West found his access to Egyptian archaeological sites progressively restricted. He died in 2018 without ever receiving a formal academic response to the geological findings he had spent his career documenting. Robert Schoch continues to publish and teach at Boston University. He has not been permitted to conduct follow-up geological surveys at the Sphinx enclosure. His requests for access to conduct additional core sampling of the subsurface geology beneath the enclosure have not been approved. The samples that would definitively date the period of water erosion to a specific geological era, samples that a standard university geology department could analyze, remain untaken because the permission to take them has not been granted. Rudolf Gantenbrink, whose robot found the door in 1993, never returned to Giza. His footage is still the most detailed record of the Queen's Chamber shafts ever made. No researcher has been permitted to replicate his survey with more advanced equipment. 3 men, 3 different methodologies, 3 different findings, 1 outcome. And the institution that controls access to Giza continues to control the pace, the direction, and the conclusions of every investigation conducted there. Now the carbon dating comes back, not as a side issue, as the center. Modern accelerator mass spectrometry can date organic material to within decades. The mortar samples from the Giza pyramids, last tested in 1995, consistently return dates older than the official construction period. The contamination explanation used to dismiss those results is standard and defensible for older carbon-14 methods. It is significantly less defensible for AMS analysis. A new AMS study of mortar samples from multiple locations across the pyramid complex, combined with optically stimulated luminescence dating of the bedrock platform beneath the pyramid base, could answer the age question with a precision that no previous study has achieved. Both technologies exist. Both are available at multiple universities. The cost would be modest by the standards of modern archaeological research. The question of why this study has not been conducted is not a question about funding or technology. It is a question about permission. The Supreme Council of Antiquities controls sampling rights at Giza. No mortar sample has been extracted for scientific dating without their approval since the mid-1990s. In the 30 years since the last systematic dating study, the technology to answer the age question has improved dramatically. The access to conduct the study has not been granted. You can hold both of those facts in your hands at the same time and feel what they weigh. Let me tell you about the subterranean chamber, not the void found by muon tomography in 2017, the one below the pyramid that has been known since the 19th century and that nobody discusses with any urgency. Beneath the Great Pyramid, cut directly into the bedrock, is an unfinished subterranean chamber, approximately 14 meters by 8 meters. It sits roughly 30 meters below the pyramid's base. It is accessible via the descending passage from the original entrance. Tourists have entered it. Petrie measured it in 1881. It appears unfinished, with rough rock faces and an excavated pit in the floor. The official interpretation is that it was an original burial chamber plan, abandoned in favor of the Queen's and King's chambers higher in the structure. That interpretation is possible. Here is what is inconvenient about it. The descending passage that leads to this chamber is not aligned with anything above it. It points, extended outward into space at its precise angle, at the celestial North Pole position for the era of approximately 2550 BCE, not at a star that existed in that position in 2550 BCE, because none did, at the geometric point in the sky around which the stars rotated. The passage is aimed at the center of the turning sky. That is not a coincidence of construction. That is navigation. And a chamber designed as a navigation instrument, pointing at the rotational axis of the planet, is not an abandoned burial plan. It is something else. What it is, exactly, has never been formally studied. Here is where the evidence has led us. Walk through it without flinching. The workers were not slaves. They were organized, fed, medicated, and honored in a village that could support 10,000 to 20,000 people. The administrative record of the entire operation for a civilization that kept meticulous administrative records of everything else is almost entirely absent. The construction precision exceeds what the documented tools could produce. The surveying knowledge required to achieve the north alignment has no corresponding instrument in the archaeological record. The carbon dating consistently produces older results than the official timeline, and no modern high-precision dating study has been permitted. The Sphinx enclosure shows water erosion consistent with an era predating the official construction date by thousands of years, and no counter-geological study has been published. A void inside the pyramid, found in 2017 by 3 independent detection methods, has not been physically investigated. A sealed chamber found in 1993 by a robot has a second sealed door that has not been opened in 30 years. Mortar samples, acoustic engineering, machining marks, astronomical alignments, and suppressed dating results all point in the same direction, not toward a clean answer, toward a controlled one. The evidence is not missing, it is managed. And this is the thing about managed evidence. It is not the same as destroyed evidence. Managed evidence means the evidence still exists, It means it is somewhere. It means there are people who know what is in those unexamined chambers, what the AMS dates would show, what the geological samples from beneath the Sphinx enclosure would confirm. What is behind that second sealed door at the end of the Queen's chamber shaft? Those people are not anonymous. They have names. They sit on the committees that approve and deny research access. They publish in the journals that set the boundaries of acceptable Egyptological discourse. They are not villains in a film. They are administrators and academics operating within an institutional framework that has enormous historical, political, national, and financial investment in a specific story about the most iconic structures on Earth. Egypt's entire tourism economy, its national identity, its relationship with its own ancient past, is built on the foundation of that story. The story that Khufu built the Great Pyramid. The story that Egyptian genius, Egyptian labor, Egyptian civilization produced the most precise structure in the ancient world. Dismantling that story does not just change archaeology, it changes Egypt, and the people who control access to Giza understand that with complete clarity. That is not a conspiracy. That is an institution protecting itself. Institutions do that. They do it with paperwork and committee decisions and quietly non-renewed research permits. They do it with the word inadvisable instead of forbidden. They do it with silence instead of prohibition. And it works because the second door is still sealed. The AMS dates have not been taken. The geological survey beneath the Sphinx has not been conducted. And the void above the Grand Gallery, confirmed by 3 independent technologies, remains physically unexamined. The copper chisel is in the museum. The worker's sandal is in a case somewhere. 0.0015 degrees is carved into the orientation of the stone. And now, you know what those 3 things were always pointing toward. Not the pyramids themselves. The gap between what the pyramids demonstrate and what the official story explains. That gap is enormous. It is the width of an entirely different history of human civilization. A history in which the knowledge required to build Giza was older than Giza, was perhaps old when Giza was new. A history in which a culture of extraordinary precision and astronomical literacy existed on that plateau, built something that encodes their knowledge in stone more durably than any text, and then either disappeared or was absorbed into what became dynastic Egypt, which then spent the next 3,000 years pointing at that plateau and saying, yes, we built that, without fully understanding what they were pointing at. That is the shape the evidence makes when you follow it without permission. The official story of the pyramid builders has changed 3 times in 50 years. The slave narrative collapsed in 1990. The ramp theory has never survived its own logistics. The current professional workforce explanation accounts for the existence of the village, but not the precision, not the tools, not the absent administrative records, not the geological age of the Sphinx, not the carbon dates, not the sealed chambers, not the void. The explanation is a frame without a painting inside it. It describes the edges. It does not explain what was inside. What was inside is the question they have spent 30 years making sure you do not press too hard on. Tonight, you pressed, and now you know the shape of the thing they are guarding. Not treasure, not gold, not anything that fits in a chamber. What they are guarding is a revision. The revision of when organized, sophisticated, astronomically literate human culture began on this planet. Because if the Sphinx is older than dynastic Egypt, if the construction knowledge predates the civilization credited with it, if the precision encoded in that plateau comes from a tradition older than anything in the official record, then the story of human civilization is not a straight line from primitive to advanced. It is something with a break in it, a lost chapter, a period of sophisticated knowledge that ended, was buried, and was partially recovered by the culture that built the pyramid on top of it. And that revision, if officially acknowledged, does not just update a textbook, it restarts the question of what we are, where we came from, and how much of the beginning of this story we have not yet found. The second door at the end of the Queen's chamber shaft is still sealed. No date has been set to open it. No equipment has been approved to examine it. It sits in the dark, in the stone, at the end of a shaft 65 meters long, behind a door with 2 copper fittings that have been untouched for 4,500 years, waiting. For what? Nobody with the authority to answer that question has ever said. The Great Pyramid contains, by conservative calculation, approximately 2.6 million cubic meters of stone. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted between 1978 and 2001 detected multiple subsurface anomalies beneath the Giza plateau that have never been excavated. The number of those anomalies varies by survey. The highest count from a 1997 Japanese survey team was 11. 11 separate subsurface features inconsistent with natural bedrock geology. 11 locations where something is buried beneath the most examined archaeological site on Earth. None of them have been dug. The survey report exists. The anomalies are real. The excavations have not been approved. That is where this investigation ends for tonight. Not with an answer, with 11 locations in the sand, and a door that is waiting for someone with the authority to open it. And one question that will never be fully answered no matter what is found behind that door. Why, in the entire span of ancient Egyptian religious texts, administrative records, and monumental inscriptions spanning 3,000 years of continuous civilization, is there not a single description of how to build a pyramid? Not one. The civilization that built the most documented ancient structures in the world left no manual, no instruction, no account of the method, as if they inherited the finished result and never knew how it was made.